Okay. So just as a quick introduction, we're looking at this being some more educational delivery method scenarios. If you listen to the previous podcast, that one we did on design bid build.
Yes.
We're going to go through a few of them here. We're going to go through design bid build, so as an introduction. Then this one we're going to do construction manager as constructor, and we're going to do construction manager as advisor. So basically a CMC and a CMA. Then the other ones that we're going to touch on is we're going to touch on design build, and then we're going to touch on integrated project delivery. So for this one, we're going to talk about construction managers. But this all revolves around this idea of delivery method. What is a delivery method? Obviously, we're an architectural firm. When we talk about delivery, we're talking about how, that entity owner or business or whomever, whatever it is, how they're basically getting from the beginning point all the way through the end, and how they have an opportunity to choose, what delivery that's going to be, through what I would consider three main components, which is ownership, design, and construction.
Right.
And then with the end game being the building or remodel or expansion or whatever that end piece is. So it's delivering it from day one to the ribbon cutting. Let's call it that.
Sure.
And I say delivery methods, every industry delivers their product to market in some way. This is just how construction delivers their product to market. And it flows through ownership, design, and construction. Right? That sounded a little bit better than my last one. Maybe by the time we do the fourth one, I'll be totally on it. But just to, make this educational, we're going to talk about, what the AIA's definition is of these construction manager situations as it plays into, the overall development of a project. We're going to also then talk about what we've seen in the industry, some regional maybe misconceptions and pros, cons, pitfalls, whatever. Kind of. So I'm going to go ahead, read the first one, the construction manager as contractor. Basically, this is the owner engages the construction manager who provides pre-construction services and then acts as the general contractor through just the construction process, right? The process, the CM collaborates during design and then constructs the project. But this would be the assumption that we're still, the design professional is still, so when we get into contracts, owner has a separate contract with the architect and the CM, right? So it's not, in the design bid build, we talked about owner, design, work together, create all these fantastic documents.
Yep.
And we transfer that information to a bid, which is then a field of general contractors that are then going to provide a final cost and schedule of how they're going to facilitate the construction. This, basically, you have this construction manager that then is also going to act as a constructor. Key features: early construction schedule and input with continuity into construction. So I would say, from my standpoint, if somebody is going to go the construction manager route, the pro of it, I guess the sell point is that you're going to bring in a construction manager. Now, I will try to break down what I feel the construction manager is also performing as constructor is different than what I would consider a general contractor, and there's a little bit of gray areas there, where, like it says here, it's early construction and schedule input.
Right. So you talk about pre-construction
services. There you go.
Probably needs to have a little bit of definition to it,
Yes.
so just for clarity.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. It's pre-construction services. So it's this understanding, and from my personal opinion, there's some good value to it.
Absolutely.
Right? Because as much as we know as a design professional running our continued logged information of what projects are doing, what the market is doing, what we see, the contractor is also living in their world of construction, and as a CM, they should have some good ties to information that they're seeing in the market from the construction end. So pre-construction services is how are they helping advise? Not only so the idea would be let's say the idea would be that the design professional is then maybe working with the team with the construction manager. The construction manager is giving input on potentially cost variations, logistics, time, supply, and schedule, right? So that they're managing how the decisions that are being made in the development of the project and project plans, how that's going to relate to the construction to help advise early in pre-construction.
Right.
Is that kind of right?
I think so. I think that sounds great. So, like in a perfect world, the construction manager is probably receiving progress set drawings throughout. So maybe, whatever.
Involved in all the meetings.
Involved in the meetings, having some takeaways from the meetings.
Yes.
Here's our 30% complete progress set.
Yes.
Here's, 50s, whatever. Going out into the market, maybe getting, running some numbers off historical data, or getting a number for this particular component or element. Does it make sense to go down the path doing this in the design, or do we need to pivot and go about it this way, just based on factors of cost, lead time, whatever.
Exactly.
But yeah, having kind of that check in above and beyond what we may be doing in a different delivery method, where it's more the design bid. We have historical data. We know different things about the industry, the market.
Yeah.
But this is more like real time, getting actual input from a subcontractor base or whatever.
Basically, taking away a little bit of the risk,
right?
In theory,
right,
that could happen when in the design build it would hit the open market. So some of that risk, because no matter what in the design bid build, there's always that risk, as we talked about before, that when it hits the open market, there's vulnerability there. So in my understanding of it, the CM, whether it's for advisor or it's constructor, because that the only thing that changes there is what happens after pre-construction. Would you agree?
Sure.
Like in both, the construction manager in pre-construction is there to be an advisor for pitfalls that they're seeing in the market before it gets to market.
Right. And accelerate getting some more accurate and real-time information in a perfect world.
In a perfect world.
May not happen
as
intended all the time, but that's the goal.
Exactly. Right? And then the purest form, there's and we'll get into it because then we talk about integrated down the road. Now, a construction manager, let's talk about it. A construction manager may have a additional fee, right? So you might be a construction manager, you're going to have an additional fee.
Should be expected, yes.
And so that's kind of on top of it. It's another layered person or entity involved. And then if we talk about construction manager as a constructor, that's going to come into there's going to be a fee, but then a lot of times when we're talking about the bid process, the construction manager is then taking that, whatever we've worked together as pre-construction and into documentation and progress sets, they would then be taking that and still running it out to bid in the open market, but the idea would be that the vulnerability is almost completely gone.
Sure.
In a way, I guess in theory.
In a perfect world. I mean, I've said that a couple times.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
And in certain instances, and this is maybe, and just as we're discussing it, sometimes I start to think about pathways of vulnerability, and it would also depend, like if I was advising somebody doing construction management, right? As constructor, I would say, well, then if you're going to do the bid and you're going to help us pre-construction and working together, and you're going to act as constructor, you should be able to drop you're taking on the risk for a full construction project for a certain dollar amount.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Like if I was doing it and I was going to bring in a construction manager and I felt that it was value to bring this entity in to help evaluate pitfalls and mitigate risk as we're going through the design process that was above and beyond what we would do as a A&E side of it, then I would want them to take on that risk from the construction manager, especially as the constructor, because to be fair, if they weren't going to get the numbers right, why would they need to be involved?
Right. What value do they bring?
What value do they bring? Right. So that's why we're having this open discussion. Now, I will say there are definite times, and when we talked about complexity and size, right? Like everything has a certain place because all these delivery methods have, I think, evolved from particular situations, right? So say you had a massive, massive complex and the design in A&E is really focused on everything from the engineering and this and that the construction manager as owner's rep, but also constructor is, you're paying for a heightened level, but you're paying for it in the fact that hopefully you're mitigating risk as the owner, because now you have like this construction manager design, like construction professional that is now running and managing. The other thing as constructor, it's also supposed to take the level of responsibility of like the coordination interaction off of them a little bit. Am I right on that? Like there's supposed to be an alleviated, otherwise that ownership has more of an integrated, in-depth, coordinated responsibility, right?
Right. No, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I was just thinking too as you're talking there, not to say that it's limited to this as the only type of project, but it makes a lot of sense when you're talking, these large complexes, hundreds of thousands of square feet, 8 to 9 digit construction value, the big stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something smaller, it certainly could be an option, but really think that by and large makes a lot more sense when you're getting into that big stuff.
When you need, like we were talking about before, when you have massive teams of interconnected people, to have like a manager firm there too to help, because as entities and businesses are overwhelmed with, say you take a hospital group, you may have their facilities group also has multiple locations. Now they're putting up a big complex, and they're like, oh, no, we're going to bring in a construction manager, but then they might also, that construction manager then may be having all of the GC contractors below them, but they're taking that like controlling operational, because even for us as the A&E, when something is so big, we're probably working on other stuff, whether it's integration of systems or we're working on submittals. You know what I'm saying? It's like another level. So in its purest form, like I feel like it definitely has a place.
Sure.
And it might be size, complexity, scope, whatever the case is. And just the other thing too is what people have to understand is sometimes when other entities are brought in, it might be because they don't have time to deal with it.
Sure.
Right? So you're paying for your time. Like it's like, no, I'm going to bring this construction manager in because I don't want to have to deal with this. So I'm going to turn this all over to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If one of the goals and the outputs that the CM provides is, like mitigating risk, getting more accurate information earlier, would you find that kind of lends itself down the road once you're getting in a contractual stage, would that lend itself to like a guaranteed max price contract?
It might.
Not to exceed.
Yes.
Because they've had all this information up front. They've been very engaged throughout.
It should be a cleaner. There should be less vulnerability when it hits the market.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's the theory. Like you're basically paying for another level, and they're taking on the construction, and that's where let's get into the advisor, and then we're going to talk about some pitfalls and how people have taken the delivery methods and kind of turned them into a version of something that's not the true purest form of it. So then let's talk about the advisor. So construction manager provides advice, coordination services, but does not build the project. So this is just a manager advisor on the outside of the construction, right? So the CM advises on cost schedule, manages construction, but does not hold trade contracts, right? So they might be working with and there the advisor, you're probably still going to have a general contractor, right? And they're not holding contract with them. And I think that's where the contract flow is very important. I think that sometimes, owners don't necessarily understand that, especially if you're coming into it as like a new, first time run at a construction project, that it's kind of about the contractual obligations and advice to people that are getting into it, understand where the contractual obligations are. And because really at the end of the day, that's where you're beholden to what you're responsible for and what you're not. So as an advisor, they're just working as an advisor, but they're not holding contract with the construction entity, where the CM as constructor is holding contractual to the construction entity. However, that's broken apart, and we could go on about granular to that.
Sure.
But the process, the CM advised, cost schedule, manages construction, but is not holding contract. Owner contracts with architect, CM advisor, and multiple prime contractors. So what that means is, so if you're looking at the contractual, like connecting the dots, that means that the owner has a contract with the A&E or the architect engineering, with the CMA as advisor independently.
Yes.
And then the owner also is going to have a contract with the GC. Let's just call it GC, the builder, right? So now instead of 2 contracts, they're going to have 3.
Right.
But, this is where too I look at, if you bring somebody, I'm looking at as an advisor, that's when you're talking about massive facility stuff, where now this person isn't even really contractually obligated to the construction and suppliers. They're really just there to coordinate and keep track of everything. Like, this is something where if somebody really, as an ownership group or as a large facility, didn't want to deal with any of the BS, let's say,
sure,
you get a construction manager as an advisor. That person is, lo and behold, beholden to you, is going to be checking and balancing everything that's going to be going on from the contractor, probably, but is really working as a go-between, even though ownership still has a contract with the design professional, them, and the constructor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I would say, just looking at these in totality, all the different this is probably the one that we would see the least.
The least.
Pretty uncommon. Yeah. A lot of large corporations may even have these services in-house.
They employ them.
Team,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to your point, probably going to be like the mega projects again, where this type of person is brought in and engaged.
Or even like where you came from, like a facilities project manager, right. You could almost consider that person as a construction manager advisor.
That's kind of where I was going with it. Just being in-house, being under the roof of
and that brings up a very good point, because when you're talking about a construction manager, it doesn't always have to be contractual from an outside entity. Like you said, you came from a larger conglomerate that did a lot of stuff. It can be in-house. And a lot of times it might be. And that's why when we talk about the complexity of the project, or the industry, and that sometimes it doesn't really make sense. Plus, it's an added cost of value to mitigate risk, and sometimes people don't necessarily think like, well, if I have my A&E and if I have a general contractor and I'm bidding whatever, they think, well, why am I going to pay this person? That's why I do see it, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I remember going through all of this, years ago, and if you look at the diagrams of where it is, sometimes yes, that's an in-house kind of a person. So we work with facilities people. Those people could potentially be looked at as like a construction manager, as advisor, or even some of them say if they do small project themselves or whatever, that they're actually working as a constructor, because they're, even though they work under the umbrella of the entity, they're holding contracts directly with the contractors, facilitating subcontractors, suppliers, whatever, that are actually doing the work. Now let's talk about the dark side of what sometimes can happen. What we see is we have entities that we've known of, or we've seen, that come in and they want to do CM work, but they have looked at basically selling a construction project, which I would consider, I'm trying to figure out the words, how to put this. Like, they want to be a general contractor without the overhead. Okay. Does that make sense?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say, like, because it's like, so say I'm an entrepreneur, and maybe I shouldn't even say it negatively, but you're an entrepreneur, you want to get in construction, so you go after something as the easiest way is I can just kind of start and be a CM and sell CM services for a fee and help people, with their construction. Sure. And some of their sale on it is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this and bid it all to these multiple parties, full coverage to all things, multiple different layers. We're gonna drill this thing down. Now, theory, that's fine, but what we see is sometimes in the early stages of some of these construction management firms is that they're not housing the responsible parties to be able to manage the work that they have. And I joke around about it, but sometimes I'll say things like, there's no supervision, and the inmates are running the insane asylum on site because there's nobody there. When we talk about like a general contractor on a certain project, some of the things that we look at is we'll look at, what do they self-perform as a contractor? What do they have for supervision? What does their project management look like? Because if you have boots on the ground, projects seem to stay on target, schedule, cost, quality. So all of those things are happening. If you have an entity that doesn't have boots on the ground, but they're trying to play as a general contractor, and there's no supervision or oversight, what happens is budget is blown, schedule is blown, and quality is blown. And so when we're advising, like from a delivery methods are unemotional. They're just delivery methods. But who's delivering in that delivery method for whatever selfish maybe purposes that they have can be very problematic. Because if you're just an entrepreneur starting at a CM firm, you can do that pretty nimble. And in the I guess if I was a client, I would wonder, like, well, then I should probably be getting it for a less cost, right? That's what I would say. Yeah, but typically that's not the case. And typically what we see is, it's galactically over budget. And what is also from the CM entrepreneur say is we see that these pre-construction services are not done.
Sure.
So it's like in some instances, they're selling a process, a delivery method, and they have some good taglines. But in practicality, we haven't been in many situations. I think we have one, but the difference between the others is they have really, really good on-site supervision. So they're a CM that is also taking on the supervision on-site.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, painting with a wide brush there on some of the comments,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely qualified CMs out there.
Yes.
But you're speaking a lot of our experiences there. Where
Yeah, those are just our experiences. Yes.
When you're looking at some that are more startup or smaller operations, a lot of risk there.
There's a lot of risk.
If you do go down the path of the CM, should probably be someone highly established, larger company.
Yes.
Has the on-site supervision full time. They've had staff for years and decades. Just long tenured staff, just to mitigate as much risk as you can.
Yeah.
We've said, it's great for people to get experience, but you don't really want them cutting their teeth on your project, right?
Yes.
Let them gain their experience elsewhere, establish themselves,
Yeah.
and find someone you really trust.
Yeah.
Highly qualified and capable.
And I'm sure, there'd probably be some really qualified good CMs out there, but and that's where just trying to talk to more so like not that everything obviously is our personal experiences, and that's where some of hopefully people are listening because they're wanting to know like what's the behind the scenes kind of story. And I'll say this about every delivery method. They themselves are unemotional. It's just a process of getting from A to B. It's only when they get kind of manipulated for purposes that are not at the best interest of the client and the best interest of the final product of delivery. So I would just say that people, if they're making decisions on this or if they're going into just do your homework, know what you're getting, do the follow up, making sure that the pre-construction services are there because that's one of the things I've seen with some of the CMs. They're selling pre-construction, they're saying, but there's nothing happening, right? So you can't, like with anything, if you're an owner or an entity, make sure you're getting what you're paying for or what was sold to you, right? It's no different at the end of the day. If you bought a product that's going into your building, you want it there. If it's not there, you're going to question. But some of this on a process standpoint, they might not be completely, did this happen? Did it not happen? Because they're busy.
Yeah, no, I think that's important point to bring up. I'm glad you said it because that's kind of along the lines I said like in a perfect world a couple times before. It all sounds great in concept, but if it doesn't happen, then then the problems come to light of we didn't get this deliverable and now it's a problem. So definitely important to have things follow through as they're intended, like you said.
Because in my eyes, the construction manager, whether it's as a constructor or as an advisor, should be being brought in as an extra level of safety, right, and security and risk management.
Risk mitigation.
Yes, and getting that early information and that should be the purest. And then also, because construction managers, I think probably their argument against like the general contractor is that, we're going to be just hitting everywhere and anywhere we can for bids and opportunities, right? We're flooding the market to get the best market price. Okay, that's great, but sometimes it has some risks if not done accordingly. And then the other thing too is, are we just because you're flooding the market to get the best prices you can from anywhere? Are these still people that should be on your job site?
Sure.
Right. That's the question. And if I was looking at a construction manager, I would want them to be vetting the heck out of these people because they should be at an elevated standpoint, like we do it all the time, right? But at the end of the day, if you have the general contractor, you have one person you can call and just, I guess, yell at if they're not responsible to who they brought on site or their subcontractors or whatever. I feel like the construction manager should be mitigating that even more.
Sure. So, we're going to talk about integrated delivery here down the road, and there's probably some similarities, some overlaps between integrated and the CM that we're talking about. But for both of them, someone's coming into the picture early.
Yes.
At some point, someone needs, the owner needs to make a decision which CM they want to go with, right? So there's probably like an interview process. They might, bring in 2 or 3 CMs, listen to their kind of sales pitch, and ultimately the decision's going to be made, but it's not going to be made on price. There's really nothing to, there's no evaluation on numbers. It's really just more of like kind of a gut feel. Like I liked what they had to say, had a good feel, but it's more of like a gut feeling than like a financially just driven decision.
Yeah.
They might hear something they latch onto and they really like, but at the end of the day, it's not really like a black and white thing. It's more of like a feeling, right? So, any words of wisdom to someone making a decision on how do you know who to choose the right CM when it's not really like an informed decision? It's more like a feel thing.
So you'll see some will bring in like documentation and they'll run you through their process of pre-construction. So it'll be a pre-construction type of thing.
Sure.
Some of them, my advice on it, there are some general contractors or design build firms that will start up a CM part of it, like as a subset entity, because they are trying to separate themselves so that they can go after different work that's not going to allow through the design build process. I would be a little cautious of that because most of the time what it is they're opening up the CM, but to still just have their people do it, right? So if I were to be looking for a CM, and again, it's different. We're talking a lot about the constructor. I think the advisor, that's kind of a whole different role, whether it's internal or external. That person should really be an independent. And if I was to say something, like I think that's a little bit more of a, in my eyes, a little bit less risky because their only purpose there then is to help the whole process along, right? The constructor, I just feel like that's a trickier one. Like I would be looking at historic successes that have come into play, and my biggest thing would be I need data that your beginning, position was the same as your end position.
Sure.
Like a no excuses end position. Like if you were there to keep it on time, on budget, on schedule, and provide what it is and oversight, it would be basically that where are the end results? Did you hit these marks that you had in the beginning? And then I would say the same thing. Like from a CM standpoint, obviously they've had to work with architects, subcontractors, and other probably, suppliers, whatever, ask about
just the reputation.
The reputation. How did it go? Like get some background. But I think when you're talking about like the really legit, solid construction managers, it should be about their process. And not just about their process, because I've been in situations where everybody rolls out their process. They roll it out, and it's got graphs on it. I don't know what the graphs mean, right? Somebody put some graphs together or whatever, and it runs them through a timeline. There's probably some timelines there, right? And it's nice. And oh, that all makes sense. And well, yeah, I'm sure I want somebody to help me through this process. But I would say is making sure that there is definitely an understanding of how the fulfillment, who's going to be doing it, when are these things going to be happening, how are the check-ins, where I'm going to see progress through it. Like if you're bringing in a construction manager for pre-construction and you have no idea where your continued cost breakdowns as you're going through the process, that's a red flag.
Sure.
Red flag, right? Like their whole purpose there is to be with the team early on to start working through some of those things. If they're not around, that's a big red flag. That's a big red flag. They should be when we get into like the pre-construction and the construction manager and some of these other positions. Part of the thing is, and I forgot to talk about this, but they're supposed to be in the meetings, helping making decisions with the whole team, like
real time.
Like when we have our meetings with our clients, if there's a construction manager in play and they're working through their process, they need to be in those meetings. They need to be talking about it. There should be updates. There should be a schedule. And we've had some. I shouldn't be so negative on it because I think what's skewing a little bit of my language, and I don't want to do that because I don't want people to get upset about it because it is unemotional. We've just had some bad experiences, but we've also had some pretty decent experiences with the pre-construction where we're going through it, and we have. So it's just the ones that we've had that have gone bad with the construction manager have been really bad.
Well, with anything, I feel like negative experiences
it does
resonate longer.
It does, yeah, it does. But we have had some, and I had to kind of pull myself back there, that we have had some pretty good experiences.
It's a valuable service.
It's a valuable service. And I will say, and I've said this all along, it always comes down to people. It comes down to who I hate to always use that whole Seinfeld thing when he goes and he's like, you know how to take the reservation, but you don't know how to hold the reservation. In my head, that's the crux. If you're getting a CM, make sure that the fulfillment of what they're. So if I was betting one out, I would say, what is your involvement? What are you going to do? What does that look like? What are you going to be involved in? And I would make sure that they were there, because it's like, yeah, you don't want to be at the counter, pay for a car, and the car's not there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's a little bit bigger leap of faith, right? To like sign up with someone before you know like what the value is. Like,
exactly.
You're making assumptions that they're gonna follow through and kind of be where they need to be at the end of the day for that budget that you've assigned to the project, and it's a lot easier to choose a contractor in the bid situation than sign up with this person that's telling you all the things you want to hear, but at the end of the day, is that's what's going to play out in 12 months from now? Hope so, but
exactly.
But we'll
because
see, so
you want them. Yeah, if you pull them in, you want the reservation to be held, so to speak, right? And that's the key. And just doing the due diligence to make sure that, and then a lot of that has to do with the people, reputation, their process, but not only just the showing of the process, but fulfilling the process. And you'll know right away, and you'll know early, because no matter what, the design professional does not have the ability to move forward without having meetings with their client to understand what the building is, right?
Sure.
There's 100% guarantee. So if you're in meetings and you've hired on a CM, and that CM or whatever isn't, especially as constructor, isn't in and involved in the conversations early, you got a problem. So.